Dreams don't die in dirt, read the handwritten quote taped to the janitor's cart. Billionaire CEO Evelyn Cross scoffed every morning. Inspirational nonsense, she'd say, stepping over the old man mopping her marble floors. Samuel never replied, he only smiled, his wrinkled face calm, his hands roughened by years of labor. To him, that small quote wasn't decoration, it was survival. He'd written it the day his wife died and his son left home to find work. That quote was his promise to himself, to keep going even when life buried him in dust. Evelyn never cared to ask. To her, he was invisible, just another background noise in her empire of glass and gold. Every morning, Samuel would arrive before sunrise, humming old songs as he cleaned the hallways. He noticed everything, Evelyn's hurried footsteps, the way she spoke sharply to her assistant, the exhaustion in her eyes she tried to hide with makeup and power suits. Once, when she accidentally dropped a framed photo of her father, Samuel had picked it up carefully. The glass had cracked across the smiling faces. She had snatched it back, muttering, "I'll replace it," before walking away. But Samuel had noticed her hand trembling. He'd seen that kind of grief before. That evening, the sky was the color of embers, and the city lights flickered like restless stars. The company was celebrating its annual success gala. Evelyn stood on the top floor in a glittering dress, surrounded by applause, champagne, and false smiles. Her speech was flawless, sharp, confident, rehearsed. She thanked everyone for believing in her vision, for helping her build something unstoppable. But even as the crowd cheered, she felt strangely hollow. Somewhere deep down, she knew she hadn't built this empire alone. She had built it by standing on others, people like Samuel, who mopped floors so her marble halls could shine. But she never allowed herself to feel that truth. Empathy, in her world, was weakness. After the party, Evelyn stayed behind to finish a few calls. The building was quiet now, almost eerie. Samuel was still there, cleaning up the aftermath, spilled wine, glittering confetti, and half-eaten desserts left on tables. He moved silently, like a ghost who belonged to another world. As Evelyn walked past him, she noticed the same quote taped to his cart again. Dreams don't die in dirt. For a brief second, her eyes lingered. Something about it caught her off guard. Dirt. Dreams. The two words didn't belong together, yet somehow, they did. Before she could think more, her phone buzzed, pulling her back into her world of deadlines and deals. It started small, a faint smell of burning wires. Samuel was the first to notice. He looked up at the flickering ceiling light, then toward the elevator shaft. Smoke. It was thin at first, like a whisper, then quickly grew thick and dark. Fire alarms began to wail, echoing through the empty corridors. Panic rippled through the few employees still working late. Evelyn, lost in her office on the top floor, didn't realize the danger until the lights went out. The building's automated systems locked down as part of emergency protocol, trapping her inside. She called for help, but the smoke was spreading fast, curling under the door, stealing her breath. She tried to lift the fallen beam that had crashed during the chaos, but it pinned her leg firmly. Her voice cracked as she shouted for anyone to hear. Fear clawed at her chest. For the first time in years, Evelyn Cross, the woman who ruled her world, felt utterly helpless. The air grew hotter, her lungs burned, and she could barely see through the swirling blackness. She thought of her father, of the photo she'd broken, of how she'd chosen money over everything he taught her about kindness. Regret stung sharper than the smoke. Then, through the roar of the fire, a faint voice cut through. Dreams don't die in dirt, ma'am. It was Samuel's voice. Steady, strained, but certain. She turned toward the sound, tears stinging her eyes. He was there, pushing through the flames, his jacket wrapped around his mouth, eyes glistening. Samuel, she cried, coughing. You shouldn't be here. But he only shook his head, forcing a smile. "Couldn't leave you behind," he rasped. "Everyone deserves a chance to keep their dream alive, even you." His words hit her harder than the fire ever could. He moved a piece of debris, his hands blistering from the heat. She tried to help, but he stopped her. "Save your strength," he said softly. "You'll need it when this is over." Finally, with one last push, he freed her leg. She stumbled up, and he covered her with his old jacket. It smelled of cleaning chemicals and hope. Together, they made their way through the smoke-filled corridor, Samuel guiding her like a father leading his child. But the fire was faster. Flames leapt across the walls, collapsing beams blocking their path. The only exit was a broken window leading to a ledge. "Go," Samuel urged. "The firefighters will see you there." Evelyn shook her head, refusing to leave him. "We go together," she screamed. But Samuel just smiled, that same calm, gentle smile she'd seen every morning. "Dreams don't die in dirt," he repeated softly. "They grow from it. Promise me you'll keep growing." He gave her a final push toward the window as another explosion rocked the floor. Evelyn stumbled out onto the ledge, gasping for air. When she looked back, Samuel was gone, swallowed by the smoke. The firefighters found her minutes later, trembling and crying, clutching the burned piece of paper that had fallen from his cart, the same one with the quote. She didn't know how it got there, but she held it to her chest as if it were a lifeline. When they carried her out, she kept whispering his words over and over again, "Dreams don't die in dirt." It was the first time in her life those words truly meant something. In the days that followed, the news called her survival a miracle. The media praised her bravery, her leadership, her strength. But Evelyn knew the truth. It wasn't her strength that saved her. It was Samuel's heart, the heart of a man she had never truly seen until it was too late. She visited his small apartment weeks later. On the wall hung photos of his family, his late wife, his son who hadn't been able to make it to the city. And there, pinned above his bed, was another copy of the same quote. She broke down in tears. From that day forward, Evelyn changed. She spoke to her employees with warmth, learned their names, listened to their stories. She funded scholarships for janitors' children, built community centers in Samuel's honor, and made sure his quote was printed in every hallway of her company. Every morning, she'd pause by it and whisper, "Thank you, Samuel." Because now, she finally understood. Dreams don't die in dirt, they begin there. Evelyn woke in the hospital to the soft sound of a heart monitor beeping beside her. The white walls, the smell of antiseptic, the faint hum of machines, all of it felt like a distant echo of something she couldn't quite remember. Her mind was hazy, her body aching, but one memory kept surfacing through the fog, the fire, the smoke, and Samuel's voice saying, "Dreams don't die in dirt, ma'am." She turned her head slightly, and that's when she saw a young woman sitting beside her bed, clutching an old, burned janitor's hat. The woman's eyes were red, her hands trembling. When their eyes met, the girl whispered softly, "He didn't make it." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Samuel was gone. The man she had ignored, the one she had mocked for his simple optimism, had given his life to save hers. The guilt hit her like a wave, sharp, cold, and unrelenting. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at the small framed piece of paper placed on her bedside table. It was burned around the edges but still readable. Dreams don't die in dirt. Someone must have found it in the wreckage and brought it to her. She reached out, tracing the smudged ink with her fingers. For the first time in years, Evelyn Cross, the woman known for being untouchable, unshakable, unfeeling, broke down. She cried silently, the tears streaming freely, not for herself, but for the man she had never truly seen until it was too late. Over the next few days, the hospital room became a place of reflection. Every night, Evelyn would stare out the window at the city skyline, lights flickering like small dreams trying to survive the darkness. She thought about Samuel's life, about how he had probably walked through those same doors every day unnoticed, cleaning up after others while carrying more wisdom in his heart than all her board members combined. The irony was unbearable. She had spent her entire life building an empire that glorified success, yet the man who cleaned her floors had taught her more about purpose in one night than she had learned in decades. When she was discharged, she didn't return to her penthouse right away. Instead, she asked her driver to take her somewhere else, Samuel's home. It was a small, worn-down apartment on the edge of the city. His daughter opened the door, her eyes still swollen from crying. The walls were covered with photos, Samuel with his late wife, a young version of his daughter, and even a few of him smiling in his janitor's uniform, standing proudly next to his cart. Above his bed hung the same quote, handwritten again, "Dreams don't die in dirt, they bloom there." Evelyn stood frozen. Bloom. The word she had never noticed before. It wasn't about surviving hardship, it was about growing through it. She turned to his daughter and asked softly, what did he mean by that quote? The girl smiled faintly, holding the old hat closer. He used to say life buries people sometimes, with pain, with loss, with mistakes. But if you don't give up, if you keep believing, you can still grow from it. That's what he meant. That dreams don't die, they just need a little light. Evelyn nodded, tears welling again. For a long time, they stood there in silence, two women from different worlds bound by one man's selflessness. Weeks later, the world had already moved on. The newspapers called it a tragic but heroic event. Evelyn Cross had survived a fire in her corporate tower, and the janitor who saved her was briefly mentioned in a single paragraph. That was how the world worked, quick to praise the powerful, quick to forget the humble. But Evelyn refused to let that happen. She knew she couldn't change the past, but she could change what came next. She shut down the company for a month, a move that shocked investors and employees alike. Rumors spread that she was retiring, selling everything, or losing her mind. But when she finally returned, her first announcement stunned everyone. She stood on the same stage where she had once given speeches about ambition and profit, but this time, her tone was different, gentler, human. "We built this company on success," she began, "but we forgot what success really means. It's not about wealth or power. It's about purpose. It's about the people who make it all possible." Then she unveiled her new initiative, a foundation named Samuel's Dream, dedicated to funding education and scholarships for janitors' children and low-income workers across the country. She wanted every overlooked soul to know they mattered, that their dreams could bloom too. The first event of the foundation was held a month later. The hall was filled not with executives, but with janitors, cleaners, receptionists, and maintenance workers, all those who had always stood in the shadows of her corporate world. Evelyn stood at the podium, holding Samuel's old hat in her hands. Her voice trembled slightly as she looked out at the crowd. "This hat belonged to a man who taught me the meaning of true wealth," she said softly. "He believed that dreams don't die in dirt, they bloom there. Today, his dream lives on through each of you." As she spoke, she noticed Samuel's daughter sitting in the front row, tears glistening in her eyes. When their gazes met, the young woman smiled, a bittersweet, grateful smile. Evelyn smiled back, feeling something shift deep inside her. For years, she had chased success but never peace. Now, she felt both. After the ceremony, Evelyn walked outside and looked up at the evening sky. The same city lights that once reminded her of competition now reminded her of possibility. Each light, a dream burning in the dark, refusing to go out. She realized that redemption wasn't something that happened in grand gestures, it happened in small, quiet moments when a person chose to do the right thing after a lifetime of not doing it. It began with gratitude, with humility, with love. Later that night, as she sat alone in her office, she looked at the framed quote again. "Dreams don't die in dirt, they bloom there." She whispered the words to herself, almost like a prayer. She thought about Samuel's smile, about the way he had faced life with grace even when no one noticed him. She thought about his daughter, who carried his kindness in her eyes. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn Cross wasn't thinking about profits or prestige. She was thinking about legacy, the kind that doesn't fade when the lights go out. From that day on, the marble floors of her company carried more than the shine of wealth, they carried a story. Every morning, employees passed by a bronze plaque near the main entrance. It bore Samuel's quote, engraved forever for all to see. Some read it once and moved on. Others stopped to really think about it. But everyone knew who those words belonged to. And somewhere, perhaps beyond this world, Samuel was smiling. Because his dream had bloomed, not in gold or glass, but in the hearts he left behind.